Listen up, because in 1996, Big Bad Beetleborgs wasn't just another Power Rangers knockoff.
Wait a minute. What's going on? We're stuck in the comic book.
This show was airing in 88 countries, pulling in toy sales that had Bandai executives convinced they'd found the next big thing. And for about 6 months, it actually looked like Saban had cracked the code again. But here's the thing. By March 1998, it was dead, completely gone, canceled mid-season with no finale, no movie, no explanation. The toy line was pulled from shelves before the show even finished airing. And today, most people don't even remember it existed. So what the hell happened? How did a show that launched with so much momentum collapse so spectacularly in less than 2 years? Look, if you were a kid in the mid-90s, you might remember 3 kids in beetle armor fighting monsters. You might remember Flabber, that blue phantom guy who lived in a haunted mansion. You might remember thinking it was cooler and weirder than Power Rangers. But what you probably don't know is the insane production reality that made it all possible, and the 3 fatal decisions that guaranteed this show would never make it past 2 seasons. And I've got to warn you, when you see what happened behind the scenes, you're going to realize that Beetleborgs was literally doomed from day one. The entire franchise was built on borrowed time with borrowed footage, and everyone involved knew it. Look, I went deep on this one. Tracked down production records, Bandai sales reports, and licensing agreements to get the real story, and man, it's wild. We're talking about corporate desperation, creative compromises, and a business model so unsustainable that it makes you wonder why anyone greenlit this in the first place. So buckle up, because this isn't just a nostalgia trip. This is a case study in how not to build a franchise. The Power Rangers, Gold Rush, how Beetleborgs happened. Alright, so here's something most people don't realize. Beetleborgs shouldn't have existed at all. Let me explain. In 1993, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers changed everything. Saban had figured out this insane formula. License cheap Japanese tokusatsu footage, hire American kid actors to film new scenes in a warehouse, splice it all together, and boom. You've got a TV show that costs practically nothing to produce but prints money, like the Federal Reserve. Power Rangers was making Saban somewhere around $6 billion in merchandise by 1995. $6 billion. From a show that was basically recycled Japanese footage with American teenagers dubbed over it. That's not just success. That's buy your own island money. So naturally, every studio in Hollywood wanted their own Power Rangers. And Saban himself was trying to replicate the formula over and over. VR Troopers in 1994, canceled after 2 seasons. Masked Rider in 1995, 1 season and done. Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, dead in the water. But Saban wasn't giving up. In 1995, he licensed another Toei Tokusatsu show called Juko B-Fighter, which translates to Heavy Armor B-Fighter, and started planning the American adaptation. And here's where it gets interesting. Instead of just copying Power Rangers exactly, Saban's team tried to differentiate it. They added a horror comedy angle. The 3 kid heroes, Drew, Roland, and Joe, didn't go to a high school or work at a juice bar. They lived in a haunted mansion with a blue ghost named Flabber.
Beetle who? Beetle who? Is that a new rock group?
Who was played by Billy Forrester, Jay Leno's actual stunt double. I'm not kidding. Jay Leno's stunt guy was the star of this show. The hook was that these kids found a comic book about the Beetleborgs, fictional superheroes, and wished they were real. Flabber granted their wish, which meant they got powers, but it also meant the villains from the comic became real too. Metafictional storytelling in a kids' show. Bold move. And there was another genius element. Saban partnered with Image Comics to create actual Beetleborgs comic books that kids could buy. So you had the show, the toys, and the comics all reinforcing each other. Cross-media synergy before that phrase made executives salivate. Big Bad Beetleborgs premiered on Fox Kids on September 7th, 1996, in the prime 3:30 p.m. afternoon slot, right after Power Rangers. And for the first few months, it actually worked. The show was pulling decent ratings, around 2.5 million viewers per episode in the key 6 to 11 demographic. Toy sales in the 1996 holiday season were strong enough that Bandai ordered additional production runs. Compare that to VR Troopers, which peaked at about 1.8 million viewers, or Masked Rider, which barely cracked 1.5 million. Beetleborgs was outperforming most of Saban's other attempts to recapture Power Rangers magic. Why? Because it had found a niche. It was darker than Power Rangers, actual horror elements with the haunted house, the monsters were legitimately creepy, and the tone was less Saturday morning cartoon and more Goosebumps with martial arts. Parents were a little concerned. Kids thought it was awesome. For about 6 months, Saban executives were convinced they'd created a sustainable second franchise. The international sales were strong. The Fox Kids partnership was solid. Everything looked great. But there was a problem. A massive, catastrophic problem that was ticking like a time bomb in the production office. And when that bomb went off, it destroyed everything. They ran out of footage. Here's the fatal flaw that killed Beetleborgs before it even had a chance. Yuku B-Fighter, the Japanese show they were adapting, only had 53 episodes. That's it. 53 episodes of source material. Now, you'd think that's not a big deal, right? Just stretch it out. Power Rangers did it. The original Japanese show Zyuranger only had 50 episodes, but Mighty Morphin Power Rangers ran for 145 episodes across 3 seasons. How? They filmed tons of original American footage. Fight scenes, monster battles, everything. But here's the thing. Power Rangers could do that because they'd invested in the production infrastructure. They had costume designers, stunt coordinators, special effects teams. By season 2, they were filming original Zord battles and monster fights that looked pretty close to the Japanese footage. Beetleborgs never made that investment. The entire production model was built on being cheaper than Power Rangers. Lower budget per episode, smaller crew, less original footage. They were almost entirely dependent on the Japanese battle sequences because that's where all the spectacle was. The beetle armor transformations, the monster fights, the special effects. That stuff was expensive to recreate. So when season 1 of Beetleborgs burned through most of the B-Fighter footage in just 1 season, Saban had a crisis on their hands. And brother, did they panic? The solution? License the sequel series, B-Fighter Kabuto, and rebrand the show, which brings us to the second catastrophic mistake. Metallics was a completely different show. In February 1997, Big Bad Beetleborgs became Beetleborgs Metallics. New costumes, new powers, new villains, new beetle armor designs. The entire aesthetic changed overnight. And here's the problem. B-Fighter Kabuto, the Japanese source material for Metallics, was a sequel series aimed at a slightly older audience. It was darker, weirder, and had a completely different tone from the original B-Fighter. The beetle designs went from colorful and insect-like to metallic and mechanical. The comedy elements got dialed back. Flabber and the haunted house became less central to the show. The new villains were more serious and threatening. For kids who'd been watching season 1, this was jarring. Imagine if Power Rangers suddenly changed everyone's costumes and powers halfway through without explanation. That's essentially what happened, and the ratings reflected it. Season 1 was averaging around 2.5 million viewers. Metallics dropped to about 1.8 million by the midpoint of the season. That's nearly a 30% decline. Toy sales fell off a cliff too. Bandai had invested in manufacturing the original Beetleborgs figures, the blue, green, and red beetle armors that kids recognized. When the show suddenly pivoted to the Metallics designs, all that inventory was sitting on shelves, while the new toy line struggled to gain traction. Parents were confused. Kids who liked the original aesthetic felt betrayed, and new viewers had no idea what was going on because the show just sort of continued without really explaining the changeover. The worst part? Everyone at Saban knew this was happening. Internal memos from early 1997 show executives were aware the rebrand was risky, but they literally had no choice. They'd run out of original B-Fighter footage. It was either rebrand with Kabuto or cancel the show. But here's the thing. Even Metallics was a temporary solution, because B-Fighter Kabuto only had 50 episodes, which means Saban knew from the very first episode of Metallics that they were on borrowed time again. No exit strategy, no future. This is the part that still baffles me. Saban launched Beetleborgs knowing B-Fighter had limited footage. They pivoted to Metallics knowing B-Fighter Kabuto also had limited footage. And they had absolutely no plan for what came next. By late 1997, everyone involved knew the show was ending. There was no B-Fighter 3. There was no additional Japanese footage to license. and Saban wasn't willing to invest in producing original battle footage at Power Rangers quality levels. So what happened? They just stopped. The toy line was canceled in January 1998, a full 2 months before the show finished airing. Bandai pulled the remaining inventory from stores. The Image Comics series was canceled after issue number 18. International markets started dropping the show in late 1997 when they saw the writing on the wall. By early 1998, Beetleborgs was airing in only about 40 countries, down from the peak of 88. And here's the brutal part. Fox Kids didn't care. They'd already moved on to other programming. Saban was focused on Power Rangers, which was still printing money. Beetleborgs was always the secondary franchise, the backup plan, the maybe this works too experiment. When it didn't work, they just walked away. No farewell movie like Power Rangers got. No special thanks for watching episode. Nothing. It was just gone. Why Beetleborgs couldn't survive. So here's the thing that nobody talks about. This show was always going to fail. The entire business model was unsustainable from day one. You can't build a multi-year franchise entirely dependent on licensing someone else's content when that content has a finite endpoint. Power Rangers survived because Saban made the investment in original production. By season 2, they were filming their own Zord battles, their own monster fights, their own transformation sequences. They became independent of the Japanese source material. That's why Power Rangers is still running today, 30 years later. Beetleborgs never made that evolution. It was always a cheaper, quicker cash grab built on borrowed footage. And when the footage ran out, so did the show. But there's a bigger lesson here, and it's one that applies to any business, any brand, any creative project. When you build your entire foundation on something you don't control, you're setting yourself up for catastrophic failure. Beetleborgs didn't own the battle footage. They didn't own the suit designs. They didn't own the monster concepts. They were renting everything from Toei, and when the lease expired, they had nothing. Compare that to Power Rangers, which eventually bought the rights to create original Rangers, original Zords, original everything. They took control of their own destiny. Beetleborgs never did. And that's why it's a forgotten footnote, while Power Rangers is a billion-dollar franchise. And here's what really gets me. They had the opportunity. In early 1997, when Metallics was launching, Saban could have invested in building a production infrastructure. They could have hired costume designers, special effects teams, stunt coordinators. They could have made original content that matched the Japanese footage quality, but they didn't, because that would have cost money. And the entire point of Beetleborgs was to be a low-cost supplement to Power Rangers. It was never meant to be a premium product. It was always the cheap alternative. And you know what? You get what you pay for. So that's the rise and fall of Big Bad Beetleborgs. A show that existed because Saban wanted another Power Rangers. A show that found a niche by being darker and weirder and more meta. And a show that collapsed because it was built on a foundation of borrowed footage with no plan for sustainability. It's a story about corporate short-term thinking, about the dangers of depending on external IP, and about what happens when you don't invest in your own creative infrastructure. And honestly, it's a cautionary tale that's more relevant than ever, because we're living in an era where every studio is trying to create a cinematic universe, where every brand is built on licensing deals and partnerships, where everyone's looking for the quick win instead of the long-term foundation. Beetleborgs succeeded briefly because it was different, and it failed permanently because it never invested in being sustainable. The lesson isn't that adapting Japanese shows is bad. The lesson is that if you're going to build a franchise, you need to own your creative destiny. You need to invest in infrastructure. You need to think beyond the next quarter's toy sales. Otherwise, you're just Beetleborgs, a bright flash that everyone forgets. If this brought back some memories or taught you something new about a show you barely remember, hit that like button and drop a comment. Seriously, I want to know, did you even remember Beetleborgs existed? Were you Team Beetleborgs or Team Power Rangers? Because I'm pretty sure there were like 12 of you who chose Beetleborgs. And if you're not subscribed yet, man, what are you waiting for? There's a lot more forgotten 90s franchises where this came from.